All right, welcome back to the Elias Macko Show. Now, we all know a few weeks ago it was announced that the province would double tuition for out-of-province students from the rest of Canada. Those coming to the province to study at McGill, Concordia, and Bishops will be most affected by this, although it does apply to all universities in Quebec. Fees would go from just under $9,000 to about $17,000 a year, basically doubling tuition rates. Students from other provinces already pay 3 times more what Quebec students pay. Now, these recent changes to Quebec's tuition structure have seen a lot of vocal protest. In fact, yesterday, 1,000 McGill, Concordia, and Bishop students ditched class for a one-day strike. They call it the Blue Fall Protest. With that in mind, all week long on this program, we want to spotlight the stories of Montreal's finest, those that came here to study at McGill, Concordia, or Bishops, and then they made it big in the world. It's our pleasure to welcome David Winch onto the program. Went to McGill University, it's in my notes, I gotta say it, in 1978 after transferring from the University of Toronto. David, welcome to the program.
Hi, Elias. Thanks for having me on.
Now, I'm sorry. I guess I aged you there a bit by saying what year you went to McGill.
Yeah, that's okay. That's okay. Every once in a while, I think about the 1980s and say, my God, that was 40 years ago. But it was.
Seriously. So David,
but on the plus side, I'd say that gives me some perspective in this, because I think I've seen a couple of crises like this, and we can come back to that.
Oh, so true, David. Absolutely. And I think that insight is going to be very, very important in this discussion. So first things first, why don't you tell our listeners your story about how you even end up at McGill?
Okay. Well, I grew up in a middle-class family in Toronto, and I had a mother who loved organizing things for the kids, swim classes, sports, after-school activities, and in my case, French. I was part of the Visite Interprovinciale program that sent me for 2 weeks one summer. That would be the summer of 1969. To Sainte-Foy in suburban Quebec City. And I was in a big family, 4 boys, and we had quite a good time. But looking back, I didn't learn a thing. Boy, I was not, certainly not fluent. So when people say I didn't learn anything in my French class, I say, well, don't end it there, because I then returned to Toronto, and as it turned out, we had French-Canadian neighbors, and I spent some time with their domestic who was home with 2 babies, and combined with the bouillabaisse she made from Guadeloupe, I learned a lot of French. And so the second summer I went to Quebec City, I made huge progress, and Mark, my host there, he and I have been longtime friends. I talk to him all the time. He was a contractor in Quebec City. But in our teenage years, we'd often go up to Quebec City from Toronto for Carnival. We'd hitchhike around the Gaspé in the summer. So Quebec became a real part of our world in high school. And I was speaking pretty good French by the end of high school. So after high school, then I was looking around for places to go. And I traveled for a year, but then stayed at home and went to the U of T. And I was restless there. Partly it was my hometown, and partly I was still living at home. And a friend had transferred to McGill, and I said, why not? And Labor Day weekend 1978, I just sort of showed up. And one thing led to another.
How impactful were your years at McGill on the rest of your life?
Oh, a huge, huge impact. I think in many ways, I'm writing an article now for my current gig at the Sherbrooke Record, and I'm going to say it was one of the happiest periods of my life. I met a lot of very, very interesting people. It opened my horizons. I say my roommates and closest circle were almost all Americans, and this was quite new to me. Everyone seemed to come from New York, and two of my former roommates are now professors at Oxford and Berkeley, respectively. I mean, they're very high flyers, and that directed me toward New York, and I was always interested in that, and made great friendships there, as well as knowing about the whole French scene in Montreal.
Now, this is the question that I have to ask, and I'm asking it of all of our guests this week when we talk to people that went to McGill or Concordia or Bishops. If it was 1978 and you're thinking about it, you said you were restless in Toronto.
Yeah.
And then you looked into it and you found out that the cost of going to McGill would have been 3 times higher. Do you end up making the same decision?
You know what? I don't know. And I'm currently writing a column and I had to look up what I paid in 1978.
Yeah.
And I couldn't find the actual bill, but I think it was $685. And U of T then was about $730 or something. If it had been $1,500, would I have gone? I might well have, and I think I would have relied on student loans then. I tried to tough it out, not ever taking student loans. I think I probably would have extended my credit on that front. And we can come back to that because I've done a bit of research about how elastic or inelastic student budgets are in choosing universities.
Well, yeah, and I think this was kind of a bit of what this comes down to, right?
Yeah.
Because we could say, it's a doubling of tuition, and I've heard the argument saying, okay, fine, it's a doubling of tuition, but where else would you want to go?
And again, I'm a journalist too, and from my point of view, we've covered top to bottom the stage one of this crisis. And the stage one is a measure comes in, lots of people oppose it, there's political pushback, there's angry op-eds, the whole thing. Now, what is stage two? What would be the actual effect? And I spent an afternoon yesterday looking up information about tuition fee hikes and how they had affected enrollment at various universities around the world. Just to cite one example, in 10 years ago, the government in the UK tripled overnight tuition fees. They went from a peak of £3,000 to £9,000. And the fallout was that overall enrollment fell about 8%, meaning 92% of students maintained their choices and maintained their path. So now that isn't directly comparable to what we might have in Quebec, but it's worth noting that generally research showed that it was fairly inelastic. You see this in the U.S. where a lot of middle-class parents have the choice of a state school, which is fairly reasonably priced, almost Canadian prices in some cases, and then the Ivy or the private, big private school, which is 2, 3, 4 times as much. And I had an experience of this in New York City. I was working in the UN in the 90s, and I had to up my game, I thought, in international affairs, so I wanted to take some courses at Columbia. A single course, one course, was $6,000 US.
Wow. Yeah. And that certainly puts things in perspective.
And well, just to conclude our discussion, I took that course and then said, I can't continue. I have a family. I can't go on and on paying that kind of sum.
And I know, David, you worked 25 years at the United Nations in New York, Geneva, and here in Montreal, right?
Yeah. And I should add, here coming full circle, when we were in Europe, our son, Nicholas, went to a private school there, and a lot of his schoolmates, as he got to final year of high school, were looking at McGill. It was a surprisingly popular school. It was like third or fourth among choices. And I expected, because he was a big baseball player and he'd grown up in the U.S. basically, that he would look toward a U.S. college. And I was gulping hard that he might choose some southern U.S. campus with $50,000 tuition fees like Stanford. But finally, he chose McGill.
Wow.
So we're a dual McGill family. He did a BCom, and he's now in finance.
David, I have to wrap up the segment, but there's one more thing I want to talk to you about, and
Sure.
that is the payoff, right? So yes, maybe it's a subsidy. Maybe low tuition rates is a subsidy for people coming from the rest of Canada. But then the other aspect is, what is the payoff? If someone comes to Quebec to study here, doesn't it long-term pay off in dividends for the Quebec government? What are your thoughts on that, maybe based on your stories and others?
I know many people from McGill who went on to work here, to pay taxes, to establish law practices in the arts, in film, in the media. I was often surrounded by people from outside Quebec, so they certainly add something, and it is a magnet for people. The way that the big schools in Boston are magnets for Boston, and it's absolutely a plus. And we should push back on the tuition hikes, and at the same time, grab hold of some of the issues that are affecting the French sector. Like there's a very good op-ed by the principal of Concordia saying, look, the French universities are underfunded. We should try to work out some compromise with them. So I think it's very good that we bring students to Quebec. McGill is a big magnet. I'm out here where Bishops is in the country in the Eastern Townships, and they are an excellent little school drawing undergraduates. All of these are very positive.
David, a really terrific discussion, and thanks for bringing in such a great, unique perspective. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
That's David Winch, and he went to McGill University in a year. I forget already what year. Probably pretty recently.